The first tutorial is for a keyboard replacement. The first thing you want to do is remove the 5 rubber covers and unscrew all of the screws from the base of the computer. The next thing you want to do is make one gap between the base and the keyboard, and make sure to use a plastic tool so that you don't scratch the Chromebook. After that, use a plastic spudger tool to remove the casing quickly. In order to do this, you put the plastic spudger tool between the base and the keyboard and just slide it through all the way through the computer. If you feel any resistance, don't force it because there might be a screw in the back, so just double check to make sure there's none left. As a reminder, don't rip the keyboard right out because there are connectors leading to the motherboard that will be damaged if you just take it right out. So there's a latch protecting the connector, and you'll want to flip it up from the black part and then take out the connector as shown on the video. If you have a trackpad, remove the 2 screws from the previous keyboard that's broken. To remove the trackpad from the keyboard, you just apply pressure to those 2 points and it should fall out with not very much force. So after that, grab your replacement keyboard and insert the trackpad into it, making sure that the connector is in the right place. So it should be where the larger hole is, and it should fit right in. There's 2 little guiding latches, so to make sure you're putting it in the right place, they should go in easily, and you just want to apply pressure to the top of the trackpad to make sure that it stays in place. After that, put the screws back in and you should be finished with the replacement for the trackpad. Next up, you want to put your connectors back in as your keyboard is ready. So make sure the connector is flush and sits properly before closing the latch, and make sure everything works, and align the keyboard back into the frame, pushing everything back in, and it should just snap on. Finally, insert all your screws back in and make sure the rubber pieces match with the hole you're putting them in, because if it doesn't, they'll just fall out. The second tutorial is my battery replacement. So after you've removed the keyboard, remove the battery connector with a plastic spudger tool as to not damage it. And the next thing you'll want to do is remove the connectors with the plastic spudger tool as well, or your fingers. It doesn't really matter, but just make sure that you're not damaging it. Remove all the screws from the battery as to remove it from the base of the computer. So now you're going to want to try and lift it up and hold it from the top. Don't force it out, pull it towards you when you're doing this. So put the battery back in and put all the screws back or where you got them from. After you've put the screws back in, you want to align the connector with the slot and use a plastic spudger tool to push it back in, making sure that it sits well and nothing is loose. After that, put your connectors back in so the USB ports work with the motherboard. And you're finished with your battery replacement. The third tutorial is for a screen replacement. The first thing you'll want to do is remove these plastic protectors. These plastic protectors will reveal 2 screws, one on each side. After you're done with removing those 2 screws, you can pry it open with the spudger tool from the back of the computer and the front casing, but don't use too much force and go too quickly because it might snap it since it's just plastic, so just be careful of that. The next step is to remove the 4 screws from the sides, and they are the small ones, and that's all that's necessary to remove the screen from the back panel. Grab the panel from the top and flip it down to the keyboard as to not damage the connector. After you flipped it down to the keyboard, you can remove the tape from the connector and remove the connector. After that, you'll want to do the same thing in reverse. It shouldn't be much trouble. It's like 4 screws after you put in the connector, and then you should put the bottom in first for the casing because it'll fall in place and align itself. Just push the latches back into the frame and put the screws back on.